first book, right at the beginning. And Genesis 1:4 says, "And God saw the light that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness." You know, if you look at the, did you notice the sermon title today? Are you just dying like I am to find out where is he going with this one? Oh, well, I was too. Brian called me last night night before last, okay. Hey, I remembered you called me. That's good. A couple weeks ago, or not long ago, in Sabbath school, a week ago, I don't know, we were talking about marriage, and I mentioned that Pastor Ross, who married Martha and I, do y'all know that story? We were married by two pastors, Ross. Pastor John Ross and Pastor Rob Ross. Pastor John was not ordained, so he couldn't do the service. But anyway, we had the two of them. But the younger, Pastor John Ross, did the message for us. And we were talking about the bond of marriage and how important that was. And of course, in our Sabbath school lesson, we were talking about how many marriages end in divorce and how much problem there is. And what is it that bonds a marriage together? Well, Pastor John used this rope. And many of you have seen this before. But the rope is, how many strands? 3. Therefore, the marriage has to have 3 strands to be strong. Single strand, okay, 2. But the strongest is 3. And that's when both partners are committed to not only to the marriage, but to having God in the relationship. And this has been around for a while, and I noticed that it has frayed over the years. And I got to thinking about that, and I thought, well, where does the strength for each of us as individuals come from? It comes from those around us. See? And then we are each stronger. And then we put that bond and strength around God. And then we have a strong marriage. And I got to also thinking that there have been a few frayed moments in our 14 years of marriage, haven't there, Martha? But it's always had God in the center. Oh. Emotional, but anyway, Brian, there's your lead-in. You have some.
Thank you, Butch. I was a guest at Butch and Martha's wedding, and that was the first time I had seen that, and actually the only time I had seen that. And it's definitely stuck with me. One of the things I like is that even if you have the 3 strands, it's not until you intertwine them together that it actually gets its full strength. So it's not until you have that commitment to your wife or husband and God that it gets its full potential strength. And that's what I love about the rope analogy. So Butch mentioned my title today. Who's curious? Today's title is Your Wife a Terrorist? So just with Butch's rope there, you probably figured out I'm going to talk a little about marriage today. But you're probably wondering why I'm questioning if either your wife or my wife's a terrorist. So I'll explain a little bit. Maybe you've heard this before, maybe you haven't. Back in 2011, a man in Britain had decided that he didn't want to be with his wife anymore. And apparently he really despised her because instead of getting a divorce, he came up with a different plan. His wife went over to Pakistan to visit some family, and this man from Britain just happened to be an immigration officer in Britain. So while she was over there visiting family, he put her on the terrorist watch list. So she's done visiting family and decides it's time to go home, but kind of has some issues at the airport. They won't let her on the plane. She cannot get into Britain. So the woman's thinking, I'm having problems with immigration. Who would I call? My husband. Duh. So she calls her husband, who says, oh, wow, really? Okay, I'll look into it. I'll take care of it, yeah. And of course we know he wasn't taking care of it. So she was stuck in Pakistan. Luckily, she was there visiting family, so she wasn't stranded without any place to go. But she was still there for 3 years. This man didn't get caught until he was up for a promotion. They had to raise his security clearance in the immigration department, so they had to do another background check. And guess what they found? His wife was on the terrorist watch list. So he kind of closed his own casket there. So his wife got to go home. He didn't get his promotion. He got put out completely. I don't know for sure if he ended up with any prison time or not, but so marriages can be tough. That's kind of an extreme way, I suppose, to get rid of your wife. There are some more gruesome, more extreme ways that I won't cover today, and just so you know, no, my wife is not a terrorist. She's not on the terrorist watch list. As a matter of fact, I love my wife very much. Oh wow, how long have we been married? Whew, almost 10 years. Well, I'm young too, so you got to remember that. I'm not very old, and hey, 10 years is an accomplishment today. You run into somebody that's been married for 25 years, 35, 45, 50 years, you're shocked. Well, for one, that they've been married that long, and that they got married at such a young age, and it worked out. It's an amazing thing today. And like I said, we've been married for almost 10 years. July 27th, 2003. I learned very early not to forget that date. Not that Amanda really got mad at me about it, but I found it to be kind of embarrassing that I'm sitting here saying how much I love my wife, but I don't remember the starting foundation of our commitment to each other. So it's important to remember that date. Maybe that's why the wives get so upset if we forget them. We've been together for almost 16 years. Strangely enough, we met almost 16 years ago. Amanda and I only knew each other for 2 weeks before we moved in together. Didn't know each other very long. I knew right away. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was probably lust at first sight, to be honest. Amanda still is and was a very attractive woman. And I followed her around and chased her a little bit, and actually kind of had to chase her a little bit. And once I got her, though, I wasn't going to let go. So we've been together for almost 16 years. It took me 6 years to get her to marry me. But she finally did. So today's topic is marriage. No, I don't claim to be an expert. Almost only 10 years. But I found an expert. Give me some advice on that. And of course we're in church, so you probably figured out who my expert is, right? It's God. It's right here. So let's open it up and take a look. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 1, verse 4. Well, when I was doing research on this, and for your information, if you want to study marriage, wow, it just an amazing amount. I didn't realize how much information about marriage was in here until I started studying for the sermon. And it just, in 2007, we had a quarterly study that was just on like the power couples and their relationships. An entire quarterly study on it. And that wasn't its entirety. So I decided to take a look and see what secular society or the outside world says marriage is. So I went online and looked at Webster's Dictionary. Definition of marriage: the state of being united to a person of the opposite sex as husband or wife in a consensual and contractual relationship recognized by law. Sounds pretty close, right? Consensual, contractual relationship recognized by law. Nope, not even close. Okay, so knowing that wasn't it, I decided to take one more look and found another one. It says an intimate or close union. Pretty close to today's standards, but not any closer to the truth. So let's find out a little bit about what marriage is. Where it started, why it started, and where's it going? So Genesis chapter 1, verse 4. Doesn't have much to do with marriage, does it? Verse 4 says, "And God saw the light, that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness." Now I'm going to kind of move kind of fast because I don't have much time. So let's go to verse 10. This is creation week, so as God creates something here, we're going to talk just briefly about it. So in verse 10 it says, "And God called the dry land earth, and gathered together all the waters, called he seas, and God saw that it was good." So verse 12, "God brought all the grass and the herb yielding seed after its kind, and all the trees and the tree yielding fruit, which was in itself after his kind, and saw that it was good." I think we got a pattern. Anybody notice that yet? Okay, verse 17. "And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness, and saw that it was good." Verse 21, "And God created the whales and every living creature. And what did he see? That it was good." Look at verse 25. "God made the beast, the cattle, and everything that creepeth on the earth. And what did God see? It was good." We definitely have a distinct pattern, right? God's creating things, he's seeing that it's good. So let's go ahead and skip down to verse 31 here. In verse 31, "And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, God saw that it was very good." Now God had created everything there by then. Verse 7, we start getting closer to the topic. I just wanted to point out that God had created everything and saw that it was good. Not just good, 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 very good. So, verse 7, "And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul." God knelt down, or may have knelt down, I'm speculating, but God may have knelt down and literally breathed into Adam life. The creator God of the entire universe took that much time to form man. I think that's important to remember. So after God formed man, he planted the Garden of Eden, and that's where he put him. So now we're going to move on to verse 18. Chapter 2, verse 18. "And the Lord God said, It's not good that man should be alone. I will make a helpmeet for him." So what did God do? Didn't create Eve yet, did he? Created some animals. Now, do you think God forgot to create a companion for Adam? Do you think God thought that Adam would be okay not having someone to be with? You think he thought Adam would be okay being alone? Well, I think God had a plan there, right? So God formed all the beasts out of the field, the fowl of the air, and brought them unto Adam to see what he would call them. Now, when you look at pictures of Adam naming the animals, it usually shows either a couple of deer or something coming up to Adam, and he's got his arms around them, he's hugging them and he's happy, or it shows an entire group of different animals there, and it's a big joyous occasion. But I want you to wonder if maybe it wasn't that joyous. Think about it. Adam is naming these animals, and God brought them forth. And remember, he made male and female when he made the animals. So God's bringing these animals to him, probably 2 by 2, male and female. So the male deer and the female deer are walking before Adam, and Adam names them. Now maybe the first 50 or 60 different kinds of animal, Adam's pretty excited about all these new things, but at some point in time, don't you think he's going to start wondering, where's my companion? You know, these are deer and strange looking animals, nothing that looks like me. Where's my companion? So I think Adam probably started to get a little sad about that. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, you're alone. The animals, yeah, they're there. You can hug a cat or a dog, and they are companions to us a little bit, but they don't compare to intellectual conversation. They don't really complete us. So Adam gave names to all the animals. But in verse 20 it says, "But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him." So in verse 21 is where God causes a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, takes that rib out, and closes it up, and forms Eve out of the rib. I've heard a lot of different explanations on why God chose the rib. And they say it's this rib right here because there's one short right here, right? I've heard a really cool explanation that I thought was that because it's so close to the heart. But is this right here where our feeling comes from? That's an organ. It pumps blood through us. It's a muscle. So I did a little check-in on possibly on what the actual or more realistic explanation of why a rib. I still like the close to the heart thing though. It's kind of romantic. I still like that. But, so Eve was created from the rib of man. The rib. Not a jawbone or skull or any part of that. Wasn't a toe or an ankle or a knee. The explanation, if God would have created Eve from a head, a bone in the head, maybe Eve would have thought that she was above Adam. She wasn't supposed to be above him. She wasn't meant to rule over Adam. But again, if God would have made Eve out of a toe, maybe Adam would have thought he could step on her. Not meant to be below him either. Created from the rib. Rib is beside him. Next to him. Adam and Eve are equal. Not one over the other. There's the explanation on why God chose the rib. And God took the rib from Adam because they would be joined together. When we're not married, and I don't want to make anybody that's not married feel bad because you can get comfort with God. But when you're not married, we're still missing that rib. We're not complete. We need our wife. We need our Eve. And my wife Amanda completes me. So, the explanation of the rib. Now, at the end of verse 22, I kind of like, again, I like the closeness God shows us here in Eden. At the end it says, He made he a woman and brought her unto the man. With the animals, he sent them to him. He brought Eve to him. I think it shows a closeness, that closeness God wants to us. And I think this also kind of proves on where marriage started. Adam and Eve, right there in the garden. Right at creation, so at the beginning of this earth, God created marriage. He created marriage before the church was even established here. Before there was any laws established here. Now God had his laws in heaven. Don't get me wrong on that. But the institution of marriage was the first institution on earth. And that was from patriarchs and prophets. So, a lot of times we look at stuff in the Old Testament, and we want to see what the New Testament says, right? So let's take a look. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. Clear there in the back. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. For this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother, and shall be joined unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. The woman completes the man, right? Another good verse kind of goes along with that is in Hebrews 13, verse 4. If I can find that real quick here. Along the lines of what of marriage in the New Testament. Hebrews 13:4. I gotta find it. I lost it. Oh, marriage is honorable in all. It's the first line there. The rest goes into talking about adultery, but marriage is honorable. So I think the New Testament points out that marriage is still a good thing even after all the trials those in the Old Testament had with marriage, because there was some struggles. Let's go back to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 31. Try to move through here real quick. Let's actually go to chapter 25. Here's where we start getting in some advice from that expert I was talking about. Because, I look here, across here, kind of getting close to the middle range as far as age, and definitely haven't been married longer than most of you that are married, so I wouldn't expect you to take advice on marriage from me. But God has some here. So start off, husbands. And this is also, if you're not married, plan on getting married someday. Full of information here. Husbands, love your wives, even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it, that he might sanctify and cleanse it with the washing of the water by the word, that he might present it to himself, a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that it should be holy and without blemish. So ought men to love their wives as their own bodies. He that loveth his wife loveth himself. It's just amazing. Sometimes I read some of this stuff and it's just, you can't give it any more impact than it already has. It's already so profound. There's nothing more you can do with it. God wrote it. For no man ever hated his own flesh, but nourisheth and cherisheth, even as the Lord the church. For we are members of his body, of his flesh, and of his bone. And again, for this cause a man shall leave his wife, or leave his father and mother, not leave his wife. Leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. That's a pretty good explanation of how we should treat our wives, right? It says to love them, to cherish them, love them as yourself. We're not meant to be mean or cruel to our spouses, wives to husbands, husbands to wives. We're not meant to ignore them or to abuse them. But it's kind of found all over the place, isn't it? Exodus chapter 20 is where I'm at now. Kind of talking a little along the lines of abuse. Butch had mentioned a few weeks ago in the Sabbath school class, they went over some statistics in there about divorce. I looked up some statistics too about marriage and abuse. And I knew there was a lot of abuse out there, but I didn't know it was this bad. I didn't. There's a lot of stray animals out there, right? A lot of stray cats and dogs. There's animal shelters all over the place. There's at least one here in Fort Dodge, right? There's one in Boone, there's a couple of them in Ames, there's a bunch of them in Des Moines. Actually, there are about 3,800 animal shelters in the U.S. 1,500 battered women's shelters. Just a little less than half. Now, I'm not comparing women to animals in any sense, so don't get me wrong on that. I'm saying I see a lot of stray animals and a need for that. We have that big of a need for battered women's shelters, to have 1,500 of them. And that statistic goes back to 2000, the year 2000. 13-year-old statistic, so it's probably a lot more now. And you always hear about not enough funding for them and not enough room for them. So we need more than 1,500 battered women's shelters in the U.S. I don't want to get too morbid on you, but I think it's important. It gets worse. 3 to 4 million women are beaten in their homes each year in the U.S. alone. Just in the U.S., 3 to 4 million. Anybody got a stopwatch? Second hand on your clock, on your watch? Yeah, it's hard to find those these days, isn't it? All right, I'm going to do a little experiment. We're going to start with 1, and then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You know what I'm counting? How many women just died from abuse in the U.S.? Every 9 seconds. Every 9 seconds in the U.S. God gives us the example of how to treat our women, but that's not how we treat them. One in 3 women will be assaulted by their spouse in their lifetime. 1 in 3. There is violence in over half of all marriages. Now, that's not saying half of all marriages someone is consistently abusive, but in over half of all marriages, at some point in time, either the husband or the wife either has been or will become violent. You ever wonder why police budgets are so expensive? Because 50% of their calls go to domestic abuse. 50% domestic abuse. Young boys who witness domestic violence are twice as likely to abuse their own partners and children. Twice as likely by seeing it. So I don't want to beat up on women at all here, but if you're in an abusive relationship and you think, well, my husband's abusing me, but I'm protecting the children. Unfortunately, you're not. It doesn't protect the children. If you're in an abusive relationship, you need help. Got a couple more here. We were talking about police budgets. The cost of intimate partner violence, which is what it is called now. It's not marriage. It's intimate partner because there are so many homes where people live together and they're not married. So they kind of had to alter that a little bit. So it's intimate partner now. The cost on society for intimate partner violence exceeds $5.8 billion a year. Out of that, $4.1 billion is just in medical costs. So they're getting beat up that badly. $4.1 billion. And again, most of my statistics are 10 years old. 1 in 10 calls made to police to report domestic violence are made by children. 1 in 10. I mean, most of us have heard the story of a small child calling in because something bad's happened to mom, you know. Did you realize that 75% of us know someone that's been abused or is being abused? And that it's estimated that about 90% of all abuse isn't reported? Start adding those numbers together and you begin to wonder, is everyone abusive? You know, really, I mean, so many people. And I know I am dragging the mood down here, but there's a point to all this. There is a point. Victims of domestic abuse, either by being victims themselves or witnessing it, are 3 times more likely to either be abused or become abusive. It's that cycle that just doesn't ever seem to end. And it all stems from how we treat our spouses, how we treat each other. And you know, statistics aren't any better for Christians. It's not much difference. So I kind of changed everybody's mood from happy to a little depressed, maybe a little frustrated. I actually got angry about it when I started looking at it. I had to take a break because it was starting to anger me that it's that bad. I just could not believe that it was that bad. Here, I mean, we're civilized, right? I mean, we're not barbarians, are we? So kind of moving past that just a little bit, and you'll kind of see later where I was going with that. After looking at the abuse, I kind of wondered, so all these people in abusive relationships, abuse must be one of the main causes of divorce. But it's not. I was looking at different causes for divorce. Abuse, of course, is a cause, is a leading cause. But other causes are addictions, affairs, people claiming that they are falling out of love, which, if you fall out of love, these strands didn't get twined together. Or something happened and it pulled them apart. Because if they stay together, you won't fall out of love. And there are a variety of reasons. You know what the number one cause of all arguments in a marriage is?
The bill fund.
What's that?
The bill fund.
Yes, money. Money. Number one cause of all arguments in relationships. Money. Doug Batchelor has an interesting view on that. He says, if you want to know how well you'll partner with someone, before you worry about sharing a bed with them, perhaps you should share a checkbook. Makes sense, right? Most marriages are not related to things that happen in the bedroom. Or most divorces aren't related to things that happen there. Most of them are related to money. I know there's little kids here. I am sorry if I'm getting too graphic. But most marriages fail because of money. Money. But they wouldn't fail even if you argued about money if you kept God in the loop, right? So moving forward with that, we talked about adultery briefly, affairs. Genesis chapter 20, verse 17 talks a little bit about adultery. Just briefly here. Chapter 17, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Right there in the Ten Commandments, telling us not to look at the other man's wife, right? Causes trouble. Didn't. I mean, that's most of the Old Testament there, right? All the relationship issues. A lot of those are caused by coveting another man's wife, or coveting the servant girl, or something along that lines. I mean, King David, man after God's own heart, lost his firstborn because of an affair. And because he killed the man he had. Man who, how to explain that? He was in love with the woman, so he killed her husband. There we go. That spit out. So adultery is definitely not a good thing. So we were talking about divorce. What's the Bible say about divorce? I mean, most of us know a little bit about that, right? So let's just go to Matthew chapter 20, verse 31. Now verse 31 says, it has been said, whoever shall put away his wife, let him give her a writing of divorcement. Now this is Jesus talking here. But I say unto you, whosoever shall put away his wife, saving for the cause of fornication, causeth her to commit adultery. and whosoever shall marry her that is divorced committeth adultery. So I think it's pretty blatantly clear here that the Bible doesn't approve, that God doesn't approve of divorce, right? It's pretty clear that God wants us to keep intertwined with Him and our spouse. Gotta look at my notes, see where I'm going. So, if you get married, the only way you can get a divorce, according to that, was if there's fornication, adultery of some sort. And we all know how tough that is, right? I mean, one of the biggest industries in the U.S. is pornography industry, right? So, that sounds like a pretty tough challenge. So why bother? Why bother with marriage? Isn't that the way it's trending anyway? I mean, most people, marriage is down. There are 2.5 million marriages in the U.S. a year, but that number's not climbing with the amount of citizens we're gaining. Well, the Bible talks about that a little bit too, on why we should get married, and that's in Proverbs. Proverbs chapter 18, verse 22 says, "Whoso findeth a wife findeth a good thing, and obtaineth favor of the Lord." So that kind of implies that God wants us to have a wife, right? If you're a man, you should have a wife. Also offers you some protections too, because if your wife is your best friend, you've always got someone to talk to. You're never alone. There's always someone there. And, you know, if you're married and your wife isn't your best friend, you should make her your best friend. It's your companion, right? I mean, you're supposed to be one. So, wouldn't it make sense that the one you're committed to spending the rest of your life with is your best friend? Doesn't that make sense? And remember we talked about in Genesis, it was Genesis 2:18 that it said, "It is not good that man should be alone." First Corinthians chapter 7. Actually, let's skip that. Let's go to Colossians chapter 3. Colossians chapter 3. Verse 18. Colossians chapter 3, verse 18. "Wives, submit yourselves unto your husband, as it is fit in the Lord." You hear that, honey? Wives, submit yourself to your husbands. Woo, we got it made now, right? I better read that next verse. "Husbands, love your wives, and be not bitter against them." We're supposed to be equal. Man is not supposed to trample over her husband, his wife. It was the rib to be equal, not the toe bone so he could step on her. It was the rib, not any part of the head, so the wife is not meant to control the husband. Meant to be equal before God. Now, do men and women have different roles? Yes, we're different. So there are different roles, but we're still equal. I know, I'm just dragging on forever, aren't I? But there's just so much good stuff. One more thing for you. One more thing. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Verse 1. "I speak with the tongues of men and angels, and have not love. I am becoming as sounding brass or tinkling cymbal." Verse 2 says, This is where it starts to get really good. And though I have the gift of prophecy, and understand all mysteries, and all knowledge, and though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains, and have not love, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, and have not love, it profiteth me nothing. Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy, does not vault itself up, and is not puffed up. Kind of a little bit of an explanation. It goes on all the way to verse 8. Love never faileth. We're meant to love our wives. We're meant to love our husbands. I firmly believe that if you're married, your wife or your husband should be your best friend. You know, it just makes sense to me. Who do you want to spend all your time with? Your friends, right? I mean, all the way from childhood, from little kid, you want to be with your friends. So if you make your wife your friend, you'll never want to be apart. Me and Amanda do almost everything together. Almost everything. We've even worked together at the same place at the same time and didn't have issues with that. We're best friends. It's the way it's meant to be. Now, like I said, I'm not any type of expert on marriage, but we all have access to that expert. Marriage isn't easy. If you've been married, if you are married, you know it's tough. It's a struggle. Even if it's your best friend. You know, we always fight with our friends too. It's a struggle, it's tough. But aren't the things that are the most worthwhile the most challenging things? I mean, every year you get married is an accomplishment. Or every year you have an anniversary. It's an accomplishment. It should be a celebration between you and